Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations Built on Lies. Lucas Smith adjusted his tactical vest one last time before stepping off the transport helicopter onto Afghan soil. The year was 2019, and this would be his final deployment as a Navy SEAL. At 35, he'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of silent elimination, strategic planning, and reading people's intentions before they even knew them themselves. His teammates called him Ghost, not because he was hard to see, but because his targets never saw him coming. 6 months later, Lucas returned home to Virginia Beach, where his wife Catherine Smith waited with their 8-year-old son, Samuel. Catherine, a stunning blonde with sharp green eyes, had been the perfect military wife during his deployments. She sent care packages, wrote letters, and maintained their suburban home with precision that would make any commanding officer proud. At 29, she'd married Lucas when she was barely 21, drawn to his quiet intensity and unwavering loyalty. Lucas had saved enough money to start his own private security consulting firm. His reputation in military circles meant clients came easily. Wealthy businessmen, politicians, even celebrities who needed someone who could think like a predator to protect them from other predators. The transition to civilian life seemed seamless. Samuel was Lucas's pride. The boy had inherited his father's analytical mind and his mother's striking looks. Lucas spent weekends teaching Samuel chess, basic self-defense, and most importantly, how to read people. Trust is earned, son, Lucas would say, but once broken, it can never be fully repaired. Catherine seemed to flourish in their new life. She joined the country club, became active in Samuel's school PTA, and threw dinner parties that became legendary among Virginia Beach's social elite. Lucas noticed how easily she charmed everyone, how she could make any man feel like the most important person in the room. He'd always admired this skill, never thinking it might one day be turned against him. The first red flag came 8 months after his return. Lucas's firm was booming, requiring him to travel occasionally for high-profile clients. During a 3-day trip to protect a senator in Washington, D.C., Lucas received a call from Samuel's school. His son had been in a fight, unusual for the typically controlled boy. When Lucas returned home early, he found Catherine in the kitchen, her makeup slightly smudged, claiming she'd been at the gym. But Lucas's trained eye caught details others missed. Her workout clothes were too clean, her hair too perfect for someone who'd been exercising. More tellingly, her phone was face down on the counter, something she never did. That night, after Catherine fell asleep, Lucas did what came naturally to him. He investigated. Her phone revealed deleted text messages, carefully cleared browser history, and most damning of all, a second social media account he'd never known existed. But Lucas was patient. 15 years of military operations had taught him that the best intelligence came from watching and waiting. Lucas began documenting everything with a methodical precision that had kept him alive in war zones. Catherine's schedule, her unexplained absences, the way she'd grown distant during their intimate moments. She was covering her tracks well, but not well enough for someone trained to detect deception at the highest levels. The breakthrough came when Lucas recognized a pattern in her behavior. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Catherine claimed to have yoga classes, but Lucas discovered the studio had been closed for renovations for 3 weeks. On Thursday evening, instead of confronting her, Lucas followed at a distance using techniques that had allowed him to track Taliban commanders through the mountains of Afghanistan. Catherine drove to an upscale apartment complex across town, using a key card to enter a building Lucas had never seen before. Through surveillance equipment he'd installed in their car weeks earlier, Lucas tracked her movements. She went to apartment 4B and stayed for exactly 2 hours. That night, Lucas lay beside his sleeping wife, staring at the ceiling, his mind calculating possibilities like a chess grandmaster planning 20 moves ahead. Catherine had no idea that her husband possessed skills that made him one of the most dangerous men in Virginia. She thought she was deceiving a simple businessman who happened to be a veteran. She had no idea she was betraying a predator. Chapter 2. The Web Titans. Lucas spent the next 3 weeks conducting surveillance on apartment 4B with the patience of a sniper waiting for the perfect shot. He rented a unit across the street under a false identity, one of several he'd maintained since leaving the military. Using high-powered optics and listening devices, he gathered intelligence on his target. The man's name was Russ Stevenson, 32 years old, a real estate developer who specialized in luxury properties. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy smile that suggested life had always been generous to him. More importantly, Russ was married to Aurora Stevenson, a prominent divorce attorney, and they had twin daughters, age 6. Lucas researched Russ extensively. Unlike Lucas, who'd earned everything through blood and sacrifice, Russ had inherited his father's construction company and parlayed it into a multi-million-dollar empire through charm and connections rather than competence. He drove expensive cars, wore designer suits, and lived in a penthouse that cost more than most people made in a decade. The apartment where Catherine met him wasn't Russ's primary residence. It was a secret rental he used for affairs. Lucas discovered this wasn't Russ's first extramarital adventure. The man collected married women like trophies, enjoying the thrill of stealing them from their husbands. Lucas found evidence of at least 3 other affairs in the past 2 years. But Catherine was different. Through intercepted communications, Lucas learned that Russ was planning to leave his wife for her. More disturbing were the conversations about Samuel. Catherine complained about being tied down by her son, suggesting that Lucas's deployments had left her feeling more like a single mother than a wife. The recordings from their Tuesday meetings revealed the depth of Catherine's betrayal. She didn't just want to leave Lucas, she wanted to destroy him. Catherine had been sharing details about Lucas's business, his clients, even his military background. She told Russ about Lucas's PTSD episodes, which Lucas had never actually had, but had mentioned in confidence to test her loyalty. She mocked Lucas's boring personality and his dedication to Samuel. Most painfully, Lucas heard Catherine laughing as she described Lucas as completely clueless about their affair. "He's so trusting," she said. "Sometimes I think all those years in the military made him stupid about real life." Lucas had survived Taliban ambushes, had been shot twice, and had lost brothers in arms to IEDs, but nothing had prepared him for the cold precision with which his wife dissected their marriage for another man's entertainment. The breaking point came when Lucas intercepted a planning session between Catherine and Russ. They weren't just planning to leave their spouses. They were planning to ensure Lucas would be left with nothing. Catherine had already consulted Aurora Stevenson about Virginia's divorce laws, learning how to maximize her settlement. They discussed claiming Lucas was abusive, using his military training as evidence that he was dangerous. But the most chilling revelation came when they discussed Samuel. Catherine wanted full custody, not out of maternal love, but because child support would be more lucrative than alimony, given Lucas's income. Russ suggested they could send Samuel to boarding school once they were together. "The kid's too much like his father anyway," Catherine said, all serious and judgmental. "He'll be better off away from us." That night, Lucas sat in his home office, surrounded by evidence of his wife's betrayal, planning his response with the cold calculation that had made him legendary among special operations forces. But this wouldn't be a quick elimination mission. This would be a campaign designed to systematically destroy everyone who had betrayed him. Lucas began by quietly liquidating assets and moving money to offshore accounts he'd established during his military career. He created false documentation suggesting his business was struggling while actually expanding it through shell companies. He installed surveillance equipment throughout his own home, turning it into a recording studio for any conversations that might occur there. Most importantly, Lucas began researching Aurora Stevenson and the Stevenson family dynamics. If Catherine and Russ wanted to play games involving families, Lucas would make sure he understood all the players before making his move. Lucas also started spending more time with Samuel, teaching him advanced chess strategies and sharing stories about honor, loyalty, and the importance of never trusting someone who would betray their commitments. Samuel absorbed these lessons eagerly, having no idea his father was preparing him for the war that was coming. As Lucas tucked Samuel into bed one evening, his son looked up at him with those serious eyes and said, "Dad, you seem different lately. Are you okay?" Lucas smoothed his son's hair and replied, "Sometimes, son, you discover that people you trust aren't who you thought they were. When that happens, you have to decide whether you're going to be a victim or whether you're going to take control." "What would you do, Dad?" Lucas's smile was cold as winter. "I make sure they never forgot the lesson I taught them." Chapter 3. The Perfect Storm. 3 months after discovering Catherine's betrayal, Lucas had transformed from a loving husband into a calculating strategist. His investigation had revealed that Russ and Catherine's relationship was escalating rapidly. They'd moved beyond their Tuesday and Thursday meetings to planning weekend getaways, telling their respective spouses they were attending work conferences or visiting friends. Lucas used this time to deepen his surveillance and create what military strategists called battlefield preparation. He identified every person in both their social circles, mapped their routines, and most importantly, began introducing small chaos elements into their lives to increase stress and paranoia. Russ's construction projects began experiencing mysterious delays. Permits got lost in bureaucratic red tape. Suppliers suddenly had inventory problems, and key subcontractors received better offers elsewhere. Nothing that could be traced back to Lucas, but enough to put financial pressure on Russ's empire. Lucas had learned that men like Russ became dangerous when cornered, and he wanted to see exactly how his wife's lover handled adversity. Meanwhile, Lucas played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. He brought Catherine flowers, complimented her cooking, and made love to her with the same passion he'd always shown, all while recording every conversation and documenting every lie. Catherine's confidence grew with each successful deception, making her careless. The first major escalation came when Lucas discovered that Catherine and Russ had moved beyond planning to leave their spouses to actively sabotaging their marriages. Catherine had been creating situations designed to make Lucas look unstable or violent. She'd started arguments in public places, then claimed to friends that Lucas had anger management issues. She'd even gone so far as to photograph a bruise on her arm, which Lucas knew came from her overly aggressive tennis instructor, and saved it in a private folder labeled evidence. But Catherine's most dangerous move was involving Samuel in her schemes. She'd started encouraging their son to confide in her about any concerning behavior from his father. She asked leading questions about whether Daddy ever scared him, whether he'd ever seen Daddy lose his temper, whether Daddy kept any weapons in the house. Lucas realized that his wife wasn't just planning to leave him. She was preparing to destroy his relationship with his son and potentially have him arrested for domestic violence. The cold calculation behind this strategy revealed a side of Catherine that Lucas had never suspected existed. Lucas's response was to begin documenting Catherine's real behavior. He installed motion-activated cameras throughout their home and recorded her phone calls. The footage revealed a woman who was emotionally distant from Samuel, often ignoring him for hours while texting with her lover. When Samuel asked for help with homework or wanted to share something about his day, Catherine dismissed him with increasing frequency. More damning were the recordings of her phone calls with friends, where she openly discussed her plans to take Lucas for everything he's worth and her excitement about her new life with Russ. In one particularly chilling conversation, she laughed about how easy it would be to manipulate the divorce proceedings because everyone always believes the wife in these situations. Lucas also discovered that Aurora Stevenson was not as ignorant of her husband's affairs as everyone believed. Through careful surveillance, he learned that Aurora knew about Russ's infidelities but stayed married for the financial security and social status. She'd been quietly building her own case for divorce, gathering evidence of Russ's affairs to ensure she received the maximum settlement. This revelation gave Lucas an idea that would form the centerpiece of his revenge strategy. If Aurora was already planning to destroy Russ, and Catherine was planning to destroy Lucas, perhaps it was time to introduce these two predators to each other and let them do what came naturally. Lucas arranged for Aurora to accidentally discover evidence of Russ's affair with Catherine by leaving carefully placed clues that would lead her to the secret apartment. He ensured that Aurora would find documentation proving not only the affair, but also Russ and Catherine's plans to leave their respective spouses. The explosion was immediate and devastating. Aurora confronted Russ with divorce papers and a lawsuit that would freeze all his assets pending investigation of his business practices. She also sent Catherine a message that made it clear she knew about the affair and was prepared to make Catherine's life miserable. But Lucas's masterstroke was yet to come. He realized that Catherine and Russ, now facing the collapse of their respective marriages simultaneously, would become desperate. Desperate people made mistakes, and Lucas was counting on them to make one big enough to justify the final phase of his plan. That mistake came when Catherine approached her lover with a proposal that Lucas recorded through the surveillance equipment in their secret apartment. Facing Aurora's lawsuit and the potential loss of everything, Russ was receptive when Catherine suggested they eliminate their primary obstacles. What if something happened to Lucas? Catherine asked. An accident, maybe? He does dangerous work, travels to meet with shady clients. It wouldn't be that unusual. Russ's response chilled Lucas to the bone. I know people who could make that happen. Professional people. But it would cost us. I have access to Lucas's accounts, Catherine replied. And once he's gone, I'll inherit everything, including his life insurance. We could pay them and still have enough to start over anywhere we want. Lucas now had recorded evidence of his wife and her lover plotting his murder. But instead of going to the police, Lucas smiled for the first time in months. He'd spent his entire adult life learning how to hunt the most dangerous predators on Earth. Now it was time to show Catherine and Russ what a real predator looked like. Chapter 4. The Art of War. Lucas spent the following weeks allowing Catherine and Russ to believe their murder plot was moving forward, while actually controlling every aspect of their conspiracy. Through carefully placed intermediaries, he fed them information about hitmen willing to take the job, complete with fake references and fabricated success stories. Lucas was essentially hiring himself to kill himself, creating an elaborate theater where he controlled all the actors. The hitmen Catherine and Russ eventually contacted were Lucas's former special operations colleagues, Tommy Norman and James Archer, who'd left the military to start their own security consulting firm. When Lucas approached them with his situation, both men were eager to help their former team leader settle scores with people who'd tried to exploit his service and sacrifice. Lucas's plan was intricate, requiring precise timing and flawless execution. He would stage his own assassination attempt, complete with fake corpses and theatrical blood, while recording everything. The evidence would prove not only Catherine's adultery, but her willingness to commit murder for money. More importantly, it would give Lucas legal justification for the psychological warfare he planned to wage against both her and Russ. But first, Lucas needed to ensure Samuel's safety and position him as the innocent victim who deserved protection. Lucas arranged for Samuel to spend increasing time with his parents, Lucas's mother Bernice Smith and father Leonard Smith, both retired military who lived 2 hours away. Lucas told them he was concerned about Catherine's recent behavior and wanted Samuel to have some stability while he figured out their marriage problems. Bernice Smith had never liked Catherine, sensing something artificial about her devotion to Lucas. Leonard, a former Marine colonel, had always questioned why such a young woman would marry a man who'd be deployed for months at a time unless she had ulterior motives. When Lucas shared selected evidence of Catherine's betrayal, without revealing his full plan, both parents agreed to keep Samuel safe and testify on Lucas's behalf if needed. Meanwhile, Lucas used his network of contacts to learn everything possible about the men Catherine and Russ were trying to hire. He discovered they'd reached out to Floyd Hendricks, a known criminal who specialized in making murders look like accidents. Hendricks was currently under federal investigation for 3 unsolved cases, making him desperate enough to take risks for the right price. Lucas's military intelligence background allowed him to intercept communications between Hendricks and Russ. The plan they developed was crude but effective. Lucas would be murdered during a stage home invasion, with Catherine positioned as a terrified victim who'd barely escaped. Samuel would be at his grandparents' house, giving Catherine an alibi for sending him away for his safety. The timeline was set for the following Friday night. Catherine had arranged for Samuel to spend the weekend with his grandparents, claiming she and Lucas needed time to work on their marriage. Lucas would be killed, Catherine would inherit everything, and after a suitable period of mourning, she and Russ would start their new life together. But Lucas had rewritten their script entirely. On Wednesday, Lucas met with Tommy and James to finalize their role in the operation. Both men had been present when Lucas received news of Catherine's pregnancy years earlier, had celebrated with him when Samuel was born, and had genuinely believed Lucas had found the perfect military wife. Learning about her betrayal had triggered their protective instincts for their former teammate. She's planning to use Samuel as a shield if things go wrong, Lucas told them, sharing the recorded conversations. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of mother she really is. Tommy, an explosives expert who'd saved Lucas's life twice in Afghanistan, shook his head in disgust. Kids should be off limits in adult games. Always. James, a sniper who'd served 3 tours with Lucas, was equally horrified. You sure you don't want us to make this permanent, Lucas? World would be better off without people like that. No, Lucas replied firmly. Death would be too easy. I want them to live with the consequences of their choices for a very long time. Lucas also reached out to Aurora Stevenson, who was still devastated by discovering her husband's affair and the depth of his betrayal. Lucas presented himself as a fellow victim who discovered his wife's infidelity through his security work. He shared selected evidence of the affair and offered Aurora a partnership in ensuring both Russ and Catherine faced maximum consequences for their actions. Aurora, a skilled attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces, was intrigued by Lucas's resources and his methodical approach to gathering evidence. She agreed to help, particularly when Lucas showed her recordings of Russ discussing their twins as financial obligations that would be eliminated once he started his new life with Catherine. He actually said he wished we'd never had children, Aurora whispered, tears in her eyes. 16 years of marriage, and he's talking about our daughters like they're debts to be paid off. Lucas felt a moment of sympathy for Aurora, recognizing a fellow parent whose children had been callously dismissed by a selfish spouse. But he quickly refocused on the mission at hand. The final piece of Lucas's preparation involved creating an escape route and safe house for the aftermath of Friday's events. He'd purchased a remote cabin in West Virginia under one of his false identities, complete with surveillance equipment and secure communications. After Friday night, Lucas would need to disappear for several weeks while the legal and social fallout from his revelations destroyed Catherine and Russ's lives. On Thursday evening, Lucas sat with Samuel in their living room, playing chess one final time before sending his son to safety. Samuel had grown noticeably quieter over the past few weeks, sensing the tension between his parents even though both had tried to hide it from him. "Dad," Samuel said quietly, "are you and Mom getting divorced?" Lucas looked at his son's serious face and made a decision to share part of the truth. "Samuel, sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people who love them most. When that happens, other adults have to make hard choices to protect the people they care about. Are you protecting me from something?" "Always," Lucas replied, moving his knight to check Samuel's king. "But you're smart enough and strong enough to handle whatever comes next. I've taught you everything you need to know about reading people and making good decisions. Trust those instincts and remember that your father will never stop fighting for you." Samuel nodded, understanding more than Lucas realized. "Will you be okay, Dad?" Lucas smiled, the cold expression Catherine had learned to fear but Samuel had never seen. "Your father knows how to handle people who try to hurt his family, son. I'll be more than okay." Friday morning arrived with perfect clarity, and Lucas began the final day of his marriage to Catherine Smith. Chapter 5, Predator and Prey. Friday morning began with an unusual tenderness between Lucas and Catherine. She made his favorite breakfast, kissed him goodbye with what seemed like genuine affection, and reminded him she'd be home by 6 for their date night. Lucas played his part perfectly, acting like a man completely unaware that his wife was counting down the hours until his murder. Lucas spent the day making final preparations and positioning his people. Tommy and James were already in place at the house across the street, equipped with night vision equipment and recording devices that would capture every moment of the evening's events. Aurora was standing by with legal documentation that would be filed the moment Lucas gave the signal. Most importantly, Lucas had prepared a series of recordings and documents that would be automatically released to media outlets, law enforcement, and social media if anything went wrong with his plan. Catherine and Russ's conspiracy would be exposed regardless of what happened to Lucas personally. At 3 p.m., Lucas confirmed that Samuel was safe with his grandparents, then began the process of staging his own death. He'd spent weeks preparing fake blood, arranging furniture to suggest a struggle, and creating evidence that would support the narrative Catherine and her accomplices expected. At 4 p.m., Floyd Hendricks and his partner, a violent criminal named Hugo Bender, arrived at the predetermined location to collect their payment and receive final instructions from Russ. Lucas watched through surveillance as Russ handed over $50,000 in cash and provided detailed information about the house layout, security system, and Lucas's evening routine. "Make it look like a robbery gone wrong," Russ instructed. "And remember, his wife might be there. She's part of this, so don't hurt her, but make sure she looks like a victim who barely escaped." Hugo laughed. "We've done this before, pretty boy. Your wife will be traumatized but unharmed, and your problem will be permanently solved." What none of them knew was that Lucas had replaced Hugo and Floyd with Tommy and James earlier that morning. The real criminals were currently unconscious in a storage facility, where they would remain until federal agents, whom Lucas had already contacted, arrived to arrest them for their previous crimes. At 5:30 p.m., Catherine returned home, visibly nervous but trying to maintain her normal routine. Lucas greeted her with a kiss and suggested they order dinner from their favorite restaurant. Catherine agreed, though Lucas noticed her checking her phone constantly and jumping at every sound. "Everything okay?" Lucas asked innocently. "Just tired," Catherine replied. "Maybe we should make it an early night." Lucas smiled. "Actually, I have a surprise for you tonight. Something I think will change our lives forever." Catherine's face went pale, but she managed a nervous laugh. "Oh, really? What kind of surprise?" "You'll see," Lucas said, settling into his chair to wait for the show to begin. At exactly 7:15 p.m., the front door exploded inward as two figures in ski masks burst into the house. Catherine screamed convincingly, but Lucas could see the relief in her eyes as she recognized this was the plan unfolding as expected. What happened next, however, was not what she expected at all. Instead of the brutal but quick execution she'd been promised, Lucas moved with the fluid precision of a special operations veteran. In less than 10 seconds, both intruders were on the ground, with Lucas standing over them in a combat stance that would have been terrifying if Catherine had realized it was real. "Stay down," Lucas commanded in a voice that made both Tommy and James, who were acting their parts perfectly, freeze in apparent terror. Lucas zip-tied their hands behind their backs, then removed their ski masks to reveal faces Catherine didn't recognize. Her confusion was obvious as she realized these weren't the men Russ had hired. "Who are you?" she whispered. Before anyone could answer, one of the phones on the floor buzzed with an incoming text message. Lucas picked it up and read the message aloud. "My son is in his room. Use him as a shield if you have to." Catherine's face went white as she realized her own words were being read back to her. Lucas looked at her with an expression of complete disgust. "Your son," he repeated quietly. "Use him as a shield?" "Lucas, I don't understand what's happening," Catherine stammered. Lucas picked up the phone and typed a response. "Your husband is gone. What to do with the boy?" The reply came almost immediately. "Finish him." Lucas held the phone so Catherine could see her own response, watching as she realized her entire plan had been exposed. The color drained from her face as the magnitude of her situation became clear. "Ow," she whispered. "I'm a Navy SEAL," Catherine, Lucas said quietly. "Did you really think you could run a covert operation against someone who spent 15 years hunting terrorists for a living?" Lucas walked to the window and signaled across the street. Within moments, Aurora Stevenson's car pulled into the driveway. Lucas had arranged for her to witness Catherine's willingness to sacrifice Samuel, knowing that as a mother and an attorney, she would be the perfect witness to Catherine's true character. "No," Catherine breathed, recognizing Aurora immediately. "Oh yes," Lucas replied. "Aurora and I have been comparing notes about your plans. She's particularly interested in your suggestion that Samuel could be used as a human shield." Aurora entered the house, her face a mask of controlled fury. "You disgusting creature," she said to Catherine. "A child. You were willing to let them use a child as a shield." Lucas helped Tommy and James to their feet, removing their restraints. Both men shook their heads in disgust as they looked at Catherine. "We've heard some sick things in our time," Tommy said, "but planning to sacrifice a kid to cover your tracks? That's a new low, lady." Catherine finally found her voice. "This isn't legal. You can't prove anything." Lucas smiled and pressed a button on his phone. Immediately, Catherine's voice filled the room. "My son is in his room. Use him as a shield if you have to." "I can prove everything," Lucas said quietly. "Every phone call, every text message, every meeting with Russ, every conversation about killing me and using our son as collateral damage. I have recordings of you planning my murder, Catherine, but more than that, I have recordings of you discussing Samuel like he's disposable." Catherine sank into a chair, finally understanding that she wasn't the hunter in this situation. She'd been the prey all along. "What do you want?" she whispered. Lucas's smile was colder than anything Catherine had ever seen. "I want you to understand that there are consequences for betraying people who love you. But we're not done yet. There's still one more person who needs to learn that lesson." Lucas picked up one of the ski masks and headed for the door. "Time to go collect your boyfriend." Chapter 6. The Hunter's Moon. Lucas drove toward the predetermined meeting spot where Russ was waiting to hear confirmation of his success. Catherine sat in the passenger seat, her hands zip-tied, a ski mask over her head, playing the role of captive. Aurora followed in her own car, while Tommy and James trailed at a distance to provide security. The plan was simple but devastating. Lucas would convince Russ that the murder had been successful, then reveal the truth about his own survival and the evidence he'd gathered. Russ would learn that his life was about to be destroyed not by an enemy, but by his own choices. Russ had chosen to wait in the parking lot of an abandoned shopping center, confident that he was about to become a wealthy man with no obstacles to his new life. He'd already prepared a romantic evening for Catherine, complete with champagne and plans to celebrate their freedom. Lucas pulled up beside Russ's Mercedes, keeping Catherine's face hidden behind the ski mask. Russ's window was down, and his excitement was obvious as he leaned out to get confirmation. "Is it over?" Russ asked eagerly. Lucas pulled off the ski mask, revealing his very much alive face. "For both of you it is." The look of shock and terror on Russ's face was worth every moment of preparation Lucas had invested in this operation. Russ tried to start his car and flee, but Lucas had disabled the engine earlier in the day. "Get out," Lucas commanded in the voice that had made Taliban commanders surrender without firing a shot. Russ stumbled out of his car, his legs shaking with fear and confusion. "Ow! You're supposed to be dead." "Disappointing, isn't it?" Lucas replied. "Turns out hiring hitmen to kill a professional killer is harder than you thought." Lucas dragged Catherine out of his car and removed her ski mask, revealing her tear-stained face to her lover. "Tell him, Catherine. Tell him how this all went wrong." "He knew," Catherine whispered. "He knew everything. All along." Aurora's car pulled up, and she stepped out with a manila folder full of legal documents. "Hello, husband," she said to Russ with icy calm. "I have some papers for you to sign." Russ looked between his wife and his mistress, finally understanding that his world was collapsing around him. "Aurora, I can explain." "Explain what?" Aurora interrupted. "Explain how you planned to have Lucas murdered so you could run away with his wife? Explain how you were willing to let them use an 8-year-old boy as a human shield? Explain how you've been stealing from our daughter's college funds to pay for this woman's spa treatments." Lucas had provided Aurora with evidence of all of Russ's financial manipulations, including his theft from his own children's education accounts to fund his affair with Catherine. "Or maybe," Aurora continued, "you'd like to explain to our daughters why Daddy thought they were financial obligations that he was looking forward to abandoning." Russ's face went white as he realized how much they knew. "You can't prove any of this." Lucas held up a recording device. "Want to bet?" Lucas pressed play, and Russ's voice filled the parking lot. "What if something happened to Lucas? An accident, maybe?" Then Catherine's voice. "I have access to Lucas's accounts. And once he's gone, I'll inherit everything." Finally, Russ again, I know people who could make that happen. Professional people. Lucas let the recording continue for several minutes, watching as Russ realized that every detail of their conspiracy had been captured. When it finished, the silence was deafening. Here's what's going to happen, Lucas said quietly. Aurora is filing for divorce and taking everything you own. The federal authorities are arresting your actual hitmen right now, and they're going to testify that you hired them to commit murder. I'm filing for divorce from Catherine and seeking full custody of Samuel based on evidence that she was willing to endanger his life. But most importantly, Lucas continued, you're both going to disappear from Virginia Beach and never contact my son or me again. Because if you do, I'll release all of this evidence to every news outlet in the country, and you'll spend the rest of your lives as pariahs who tried to murder a decorated veteran and use his child as a human shield. Catherine finally found her voice. What about my rights as Samuel's mother? Lucas's laugh was harsh. You forfeited those rights when you told killers to use him as a shield. Any family court judge who hears that recording will terminate your parental rights immediately. You can't take my son from me, Catherine said desperately. You gave him up yourself, Lucas replied. I just made sure everyone would hear you do it. Aurora approached Russ with divorce papers. Sign these now, or I'll have you arrested for attempting to defraud our daughter's education funds. Russ signed the papers with shaking hands, his empire crumbling around him in real time. Lucas turned to Catherine. You have two choices. Sign the divorce papers Aurora prepared for you. Agree to give up all parental rights to Samuel and leave Virginia quietly. Or spend the next 20 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder. I need time to think, Catherine said weakly. No, Lucas replied firmly. You needed time to think before you decided to have me killed. Now you just need to sign papers and disappear. Catherine signed the documents, tears streaming down her face as she realized she'd lost everything. Her marriage, her son, her future, and any claim to the comfortable life she'd tried to steal. Lucas pocketed the signed papers and looked at both Russ and Catherine with complete disdain. You thought you were playing a game against a simple soldier who'd be easy to manipulate and eliminate. You never bothered to learn who you were really dealing with. Now you know, Lucas said, walking back toward his car. And now you'll live with the consequences for the rest of your lives. As Lucas drove away, leaving Russ and Catherine stranded in the abandoned parking lot with their shattered dreams, he felt the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. But more than that, he felt the peace that came from protecting his son from people who had been willing to sacrifice him for money. The hunt was over. Justice had been served, and Samuel would grow up knowing his father would always fight for him, no matter what predators emerge from the shadows. Chapter 7. Aftermath and Reckonings. 2 weeks after the confrontation in the parking lot, Lucas sat in his lawyer's office reviewing the finalized divorce decree and custody agreement. Catherine had not contested any of the terms, having been advised by her attorney that fighting a man with recordings of her planning murder and child endangerment would be both futile and financially devastating. Leonard Bishop, Lucas's attorney and a former military lawyer, shook his head as he reviewed the evidence Lucas had gathered. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen a case where the evidence was this comprehensive. You documented everything. I had good teachers, Lucas replied. When you're hunting people who want to kill you, you learn to be thorough. Samuel had returned from his grandparents' house the previous week to find his mother gone and his father eager to explain the situation age-appropriately. Lucas told his son that Catherine had made choices that meant she couldn't be part of their family anymore, but that Samuel would always be loved and protected. Samuel, with the emotional intelligence that had always impressed Lucas, seemed to understand more than he let on. She wasn't acting like she loved us anymore, he said quietly. I could tell. Lucas was proud of his son's perceptiveness, but also sad that a child had to learn such harsh lessons about adult betrayal. Some people change, son, but your father will never change when it comes to protecting you. The legal consequences for Russ and Catherine continued to unfold throughout the following months. Aurora's divorce proceedings had revealed extensive financial misconduct in Russ's business dealings, leading to investigations by both state and federal agencies. The evidence Lucas had provided about the murder conspiracy had been turned over to law enforcement, though both Russ and Catherine had fled Virginia before they could be arrested. Floyd Hendricks and Hugo Bender, the actual hitmen, had been arrested and charged with multiple federal crimes. In exchange for reduced sentences, both men provided detailed testimony about Russ's solicitation of murder services, creating a federal case that would follow Russ wherever he tried to hide. Aurora had proven to be a formidable ally in ensuring Russ faced maximum consequences. Her legal skills, combined with Lucas's intelligence-gathering abilities, had created a systematic destruction of everything Russ had built through his inherited privilege and corrupt practices. He's living in a studio apartment in Florida now, Aurora reported during one of their regular coordination calls, working as a car salesman under his real name because he can't get legitimate employment anywhere else. The federal charges follow him everywhere. Lucas felt no sympathy for Russ's downfall. What about his daughters? They're with me full-time now, and they're better off, Aurora said. Honestly, Russ was never much of a father anyway. They barely notice he's gone except that there's less tension in the house. Lucas understood that feeling. Samuel had actually seemed happier and more relaxed since Catherine's departure, confirming Lucas's suspicion that his son had been affected by the toxic atmosphere more than anyone realized. The most satisfying development came when Lucas learned that Catherine was living with her sister in Oregon, working as a waitress and struggling to make ends meet. Her brief taste of luxury with Russ had ended when he could no longer afford to support her, and she discovered that men weren't lining up to rescue a woman known for betraying her military husband and endanger her child. Lucas also learned that Catherine had tried to contact Samuel through social media, but the boy had blocked her immediately and reported the contact to his father. Samuel's loyalty wasn't based on Lucas's manipulation, but on his own clear understanding of who had protected him and who had been willing to sacrifice him. I don't want to talk to her, Samuel told Lucas matter-of-factly. She made her choice. Lucas was struck by his son's wisdom and maturity, but also saddened that Samuel had been forced to grow up so quickly. Still, Lucas was proud that he'd raised a boy who could recognize betrayal and respond appropriately. 6 months after the confrontation, Lucas received an unexpected visitor at his security consulting office. Bernice Reese, Catherine's former best friend, had driven from North Carolina to speak with him personally. I wanted to apologize, Bernice said, tears in her eyes. We all knew something was wrong with Catherine's behavior, but none of us wanted to believe she could do what she did. Lucas invited Bernice to sit down, curious about what had prompted the visit. She called me last week, Bernice continued. She wanted me to help her get visitation rights with Samuel. She was talking about how you'd poisoned him against her and how she deserved another chance. What did you tell her? I told her the truth, Bernice said firmly. I told her that any mother who would let strangers use her child as a human shield deserved to lose that child forever. I told her she was lucky you didn't have her put in prison. Lucas appreciated Bernice's honesty and loyalty. How is she handling that? Not well, Bernice admitted. But honestly, Lucas, I think she's finally understanding what she gave up. Living in poverty, working minimum wage jobs, no friends because everyone knows what she did. I think she's realizing that the life she had with you was the best thing that ever happened to her. Lucas felt no satisfaction in Catherine's suffering, but he also felt no sympathy. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Samuel is lucky to have you, Bernice said as she prepared to leave. And I'm sorry we didn't speak up sooner about the changes we saw in Catherine. Maybe this could have been prevented. Maybe, Lucas replied. But I'm not sure Catherine was ever the person I thought she was. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see. After Bernice left, Lucas reflected on the past year and the lessons it had taught him about trust, betrayal, and the importance of protecting the people who truly mattered. He'd lost a wife, but he gained absolute clarity about who deserved his loyalty and protection. Samuel was thriving in school, excelling in both academics and sports, and seemed genuinely happy for the first time in months. Lucas had arranged for counseling to help his son process the dramatic changes in his life, but Samuel seemed remarkably resilient. Dad, Samuel said one evening as they played chess, Do you think you'll ever get married again? Lucas considered the question carefully. Someday, maybe, but only to someone who understands that you and I are a package deal, and that your well-being comes first. Samuel smiled. Good. I like it being just us anyway. Lucas smiled back, knowing that whatever the future held, he and Samuel would face it together, stronger for having survived betrayal and learned the true value of loyalty. Chapter 8. New Beginnings and Old Lessons. 1 year after Catherine's departure, Lucas had built a new life that felt more authentic than anything he'd experienced during his marriage. His security consulting business was thriving, with clients seeking his expertise in threat assessment and personal protection. His reputation for thoroughness and discretion had spread throughout the East Coast's wealthy and politically connected communities. Samuel, now 9 years old, had grown into a confident and perceptive young man who seemed older than his years. Lucas made sure to balance his son's premature wisdom with age-appropriate activities and friendships, enrolling him in martial arts classes and chess tournaments where he could excel while still being a child. The chess lessons had proven particularly valuable. Samuel's ability to think several moves ahead and anticipate his opponent's strategies reminded Lucas daily of the importance of teaching his son to read people and situations accurately. Dad, why do you always tell me to watch what people do instead of listening to what they say? Samuel asked one evening during their usual post-dinner chess game. Because actions show you who people really are, Lucas replied, moving his bishop to threaten Samuel's queen. Words are easy to fake, but consistent behavior tells the truth. Samuel studied the board, recognizing the trap his father had set. Like how Mom used to say she loved us, but she was always on her phone when we wanted to talk to her. Lucas was struck by his son's insight. Exactly like that. You noticed a disconnect even before I did. I tried to tell you, Samuel said quietly, but I didn't know how. Lucas felt a pang of regret for not listening more carefully to his son's observations. You can always tell me anything, Samuel. I promise to listen better. Samuel nodded and made his move, successfully avoiding Lucas's trap and setting up a counterattack. Check. Lucas smiled proudly at his son's tactical thinking. Very good. You saw through the deception and turned it into an advantage. You taught me that, Samuel replied. People who try to trick you usually have weaknesses you can exploit. 3 months later, Lucas received an unexpected phone call from Aurora Stevenson. Her divorce from Russ had been finalized, and she'd successfully rebuilt her law practice around representing victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud. Her daughters were thriving, and she'd emerged from the ordeal stronger and more independent than ever. I wanted to thank you again, Aurora said. Not just for exposing Russ's affairs, but for showing me how to fight back strategically instead of just reacting emotionally. You had all the skills already, Lucas replied. You just needed to see him clearly enough to use them. I've been thinking about something, Aurora continued. My daughters have been asking about you and Samuel. They remember him from school events before. Everything happened. Would you be interested in letting them reconnect? Maybe a play date or something innocent. Lucas considered the suggestion. Samuel had mentioned missing some of his former friends whose parents had distanced themselves from Lucas's family during the scandal. I think Samuel would like that. And it might be good for him to spend time with other kids who understand what it's like when parents disappoint you. The play dates became regular occurrences, and Lucas found himself enjoying Aurora's company as well. She was intelligent, strong, and shared his protective instincts toward children. Unlike Catherine's shallow charm, Aurora's attractiveness came from genuine warmth and competence. More importantly, Samuel seemed to genuinely like Aurora and her daughters. Lucas watched carefully for any signs that his son felt pressured or uncomfortable, but Samuel appeared to enjoy having a female influence in his life again, one who treated him with genuine affection rather than seeing him as an obstacle. Aurora's nice, Samuel observed after one evening when she joined them for dinner. She actually listens when kids talk, and she doesn't check her phone every 5 minutes. Lucas appreciated his son's continued focus on actions over words. She's been through some difficult times too, so she understands what it's like when adults let you down. Do you like her? Samuel asked directly. I do, Lucas answered honestly. But you're the most important person in my life, and that won't change no matter who else becomes part of our family. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. I think she'd be good for us. She's not trying to be fake nice, and her daughters are pretty cool. 6 months into their relationship, Aurora approached Lucas with a concern that demonstrated her understanding of his protective nature. I need to tell you something about Catherine, she said seriously. Lucas's attention sharpened immediately. What about her? She's been calling my office, trying to get information about you and Samuel. She claims she wants to make amends and reconnect with her son. Lucas felt the familiar cold calculation settle over him. What did you tell her? Nothing, obviously. But she's persistent, and she seems to think that enough time has passed for people to forget what she did. Some things shouldn't be forgotten, Lucas said quietly. Aurora reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not suggesting you let her back into Samuel's life. I'm suggesting we need to be prepared for her to escalate her attempts. Lucas appreciated Aurora's strategic thinking and her use of the word we when discussing threats to his family. What do you recommend? Document everything. Every call, every attempt at contact. And make sure Samuel knows what to do if she approaches him directly. Lucas had already prepared Samuel for this possibility, but Aurora's legal expertise helped them refine their protective strategies. They developed protocols for different scenarios and made sure both Samuel and Aurora's daughters understood how to respond to unexpected contact from Catherine or Russ. The preparation proved valuable when Catherine appeared at Samuel's school 3 weeks later, claiming to be there for a parent-teacher conference. The school's security, already briefed on the custody situation, immediately contacted Lucas and prevented Catherine from accessing Samuel. Lucas arrived at the school to find Catherine arguing with the principal about her rights as Samuel's mother. She looked older and harder than he remembered, with the brittle desperation of someone whose life hadn't gone according to plan. Lucas, she said when she saw him, her voice taking on a manipulative tone he now recognized so clearly. We need to talk about Samuel. He's my son, too. You gave up that right, Lucas replied calmly. In writing. With witnesses. I was coerced, Catherine claimed. You threatened me. Lucas smiled coldly. I recorded you planning my murder and agreeing to let strangers use our son as a human shield. There was no coercion involved. The principal, who had been briefed on the situation, escorted Catherine off school property while Lucas collected Samuel from his classroom. His son seemed unshaken by the incident, having been well prepared for this possibility. Was that her? Samuel asked matter-of-factly. Yes. Did you see her? No, but I could tell something was happening from how the teachers were acting, Samuel replied. I'm glad she didn't get to talk to me. I don't have anything to say to her. Lucas was proud of his son's composure and clear thinking. Samuel had internalized the lessons about loyalty, betrayal, and consequences without becoming bitter or fearful. That evening, Aurora helped Lucas document the incident and file the necessary legal papers to strengthen the restraining order against Catherine. As they worked together to protect their children, Lucas realized that his relationship with Aurora was built on the solid foundation of shared values and mutual respect that his marriage to Catherine had always lacked. She's not going to give up easily, Aurora observed as they reviewed the security footage from school. Neither am I, Lucas replied. And now she's not just threatening my son, she's threatening our family. Aurora smiled at his use of the word, our, understanding that Lucas had fully committed to protecting not just Samuel, but everyone he'd chosen to include in their circle of trust. The war with Catherine wasn't over, but Lucas was confident that this time, he was fighting alongside someone who understood the stakes and possessed the skills to help him win. Chapter 9, Final Justice. 2 years after Catherine's first attempt to reconnect with Samuel, her efforts had escalated into a systematic campaign of harassment that demonstrated her complete inability to accept the consequences of her choices. She'd hired private investigators to track Lucas and Samuel, attempted to contact Samuel through fake social media accounts, and even tried to manipulate Samuel's classmates' parents into providing information about his daily routine. Each attempt was documented, recorded, and added to the growing file that Aurora maintained with legal precision. Catherine's behavior had progressed from desperate to obsessive to genuinely threatening, justifying increasingly severe legal responses. The breaking point came when Catherine attempted to kidnap Samuel from his martial arts class. She'd waited in the parking lot until Lucas stepped inside to speak with the instructor, then approached Samuel as he walked to their car. "Samuel, honey, it's Mommy," she said, reaching for his arm. "I missed you so much. Come with me so we can talk." Samuel, now 11 years old and trained in both self-defense and threat recognition, immediately stepped back and spoke loudly enough for other parents to hear. "I don't know you. My father told me never to go anywhere with strangers." The public nature of Samuel's rejection and the way other parents immediately moved to protect him created a scene that left Catherine exposed and humiliated. But more importantly, it provided witnesses to her attempted kidnapping. Lucas emerged from the building to find Catherine being restrained by 3 other fathers while Samuel stood safely behind them, completely calm and in control of the situation. "She tried to make me go with her," Samuel reported to his father with the clinical precision Lucas had taught him. "I told her I don't know her and asked for help." Lucas felt pride in his son's perfect execution of their safety protocols, but also a cold fury at Catherine's willingness to traumatize Samuel in her desperate attempt to reclaim a relationship she destroyed. "Ma'am, you need to leave now," one of the other fathers said to Catherine. "We've already called the police." Catherine looked at Lucas with a mixture of desperation and hatred. "He's my son. You can't keep him from me forever." "Watch me," Lucas replied quietly. When the police arrived, they found a clear case of attempted kidnapping by someone who had no legal custody rights and was violating multiple restraining orders. Catherine was arrested on the spot, finally facing criminal consequences for her years of harassment. Aurora, who had rushed to the scene when Lucas called her, documented everything for the legal proceedings that would follow. As an experienced attorney, she knew this incident would provide the evidence needed to permanently end Catherine's ability to threaten Samuel. "This is going to federal court," Aurora told Lucas as they watched Catherine being placed in the police car. "Kidnapping across state lines, violating federal restraining orders, stalking a minor. She's looking at serious prison time." Lucas felt no satisfaction in Catherine's arrest, only relief that Samuel would finally be safe from her increasing desperation. "How long?" 5 to 10 years minimum," Aurora replied. "And when she gets out, she'll be a convicted felon with a record of child endangerment. No family court in the country would give her custody rights." Samuel, who had been remarkably composed throughout the incident, finally showed his age when he looked up at Lucas with tears in his eyes. "I did what you taught me, right?" Lucas knelt down and hugged his son tightly. "You did everything perfectly, Samuel. You kept yourself safe and got help from trusted adults. I'm so proud of you." "I don't want to see her again," Samuel said quietly. "You won't have to," Lucas promised. "She made her choices, and now she has to live with them." 3 months later, Catherine pled guilty to federal kidnapping charges in exchange for a 7-year sentence. Her attorney had advised her that fighting the charges would likely result in a much longer prison term, given the extensive documentation of her harassment campaign and the eyewitness testimony from the attempted kidnapping. Lucas attended the sentencing hearing with Aurora and Samuel, wanting his son to see that justice had consequences for people who threatened their family. Samuel listened quietly as the judge detailed Catherine's crimes and explained why her behavior required significant punishment. "The court finds that the defendant has shown a pattern of escalating criminal behavior and complete disregard for her child's well-being," the judge stated. "Her willingness to traumatize her own son in pursuit of her selfish goals demonstrates a fundamental unfitness for parenthood." When given the opportunity to address the court, Catherine attempted one final manipulation, claiming she was a victim of Lucas's psychological warfare and that she'd only been trying to reconnect with her son. The judge was unimpressed. "Ms. Smith, you had multiple opportunities to pursue legal remedies if you believed your custody rights had been unjustly terminated. Instead, you chose to stalk, harass, and ultimately attempt to kidnap a child. Your actions speak louder than your words." After the sentencing, Lucas, Samuel, and Aurora walked out of the courthouse together, finally free from the shadow that had hung over their family for 3 years. "Is it really over?" Samuel asked. "It's really over," Lucas confirmed. By the time she gets out of prison, you'll be an adult who can make your own decisions about whether you want any contact with her. Samuel considered this. I don't think I will. People who try to hurt you once will usually try again. Lucas was struck by his son's wisdom and his clear understanding of the lessons they'd learned together. That's very smart thinking, Samuel. 6 months later, Lucas and Aurora were married in a small ceremony attended by close friends and family. Samuel served as Lucas's best man, and Aurora's daughters were her bridesmaids. The ceremony was held in the backyard of their new home, a larger house that could accommodate their blended family. During his wedding speech, Lucas reflected on the journey that had brought them together. I used to think that trust was something you gave freely until someone proved they didn't deserve it. Now I understand that trust is something you build carefully with people who earn it through consistent actions. He looked at Aurora, then at Samuel and the girls. This family is built on the foundation of people who chose each other and who prove every day that they deserve each other's loyalty and protection. Aurora's vows included a promise to Samuel that demonstrated her understanding of Lucas's priorities. Samuel, I promise to be a stepmother who earns your respect through my actions, not my title. Your father's love for you is one of the things I admire most about him, and I will never ask him to choose between us because I know you will always come first. Samuel smiled at Aurora's words, having learned to value people who understood their place in his father's hierarchy of loyalties. As the reception continued into the evening, Lucas watched his new family interact with the satisfaction of a man who had successfully protected what mattered most. Samuel was laughing with his new stepsisters, planning adventures and sharing stories. Aurora was discussing future vacation plans with Lucas's parents, who had embraced her as the daughter-in-law they'd always hoped for. Tommy and James, Lucas's former teammates who had helped expose Catherine's betrayal, raised toast to the groom who had turned a devastating betrayal into the foundation for a stronger, more authentic life. To Lucas, Tommy said, who proved that the best revenge against people who try to destroy your family is building a better family without them. Lucas raised his glass in response, looking around at the faces of people who had earned their place in his life through loyalty, sacrifice, and genuine care for each other. To second chances, Lucas replied, and to the wisdom to recognize the difference between people who deserve them and people who don't. As the evening wound down, Samuel approached his father with a question that showed how much he'd grown. Dad, do you think she'll ever understand what she lost? Lucas considered the question carefully. Maybe, son, but that's not our concern anymore. Our concern is appreciating what we have and protecting it from people who would try to take it away. Samuel nodded, understanding that the lessons they'd learned together about loyalty, betrayal, and consequences would serve him well throughout his life. Lucas looked around at his new family, built on the ashes of the old one, and felt the deep satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. He'd protected his son, punished those who had betrayed them, and found people worthy of his trust and protection. The war was over, justice had been served, and the family that remained was stronger for having survived the testing. As Lucas tucked Samuel in a bed in their new home, his son asked one final question. Dad, would you do it all again? Fight that hard to protect us? Lucas smiled and smoothed his son's hair. Every time, Samuel. Every single time. Outside, Aurora was checking the security system that Lucas had installed throughout their new home. She understood that a man who had learned to protect his family from betrayal would never stop being vigilant about their safety. But this time, Lucas wasn't protecting his family alone. This time, he had a partner who understood the value of loyalty and the price of betrayal. This time, they were ready for anything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.